So I'll be refuting a proposition about infrastructure. And my opponent's claim was that America's infrastructure will be unprepared for supporting the future generations of Americans. And his secondary claims were that, first, America's current infrastructure is not sufficient. Secondly, that the changing conditions will further create problems in the infrastructure. And that, third, despite the great need for America's infrastructure, politicians are neglecting infrastructure development. So in response to his first claim, although America's current infrastructure marginally supports our current population, new projects are being developed in order to improve the current situation. And so I didn't really find any evidence that was lacking in his speech, and so it was mostly just a reasoning challenge, how he doesn't really claim, or he doesn't really explain, or he doesn't assume that there are no further innovations or initiatives that are being made to improve America's current infrastructure. So he is assuming that we're in a standstill in development. And according to the American Society of Civil Engineers report, he does mention about the bridges and how the bridges necessarily have a about 1-to-4 ratio of bridges being about 50 years old and not being designed to carry the loads that they do now. However, due to the initiative, or due to the realization that we have this problem at hand, all levels of government are necessarily creating an effort to reduce the number of structurally deficient bridges in the United States. And in fact, $941 billion have already been invested into this initiative, but it's still far from the $2,400 billion or $42 billion that are required. As well as the fact that unlike major infrastructure facilities, which he also mentioned about dams, but the majority of dams are privately owned. And so because of the fact that most of the dams are privately owned, FEMA has created a national dam safety program to partner with states and private sectors to increase dam maintenance. And also to meet the further demands of the growing American public, several government measures have been implemented, like the Build American Investment Initiative launched by the Obama administration. And this initiative set pattern to collaboration to the private sector in order to expand our nation's infrastructure. In regards to his second claim that, I'm sorry, I have a lot of pages, that changing conditions will further create problems in infrastructure today, that a lot of technological advancements are being created into today's infrastructure in order to improve what's happening. As mentioned before, there are many rehabilitation programs as well as maintenance programs made to bridges today, as well as implementing sensors and new materials that will necessarily prolong the lives of these bridges and structures. As well as comparing the current American infrastructure to other countries, the evidence presented almost seems to exaggerate how America is falling behind. However, according to the Global Competitiveness Index of 2017 to 2018, the United States only falls 9th in infrastructure with a score of 6 out of 7, as well as a positive trend, indicating the improvement of our infrastructure over the years. He also, again, does not account for new innovative projects that create new structures that will further meet the demands of the people. And to counter his claims, just as rehabilitation programs are being created in order to improve the infrastructure of our current infrastructure, new technological improvements are being made to build structures faster and better. As said, sensors are being embedded, as well as new materials. For example, ultra-high performance concrete, high performance steel, and composites to add durability, higher strengths, resilience, and longer life to bridges. And according to his third claim, saying that politicians have more incentive regarding building new bridges instead of creating maintenance projects in order to maintain these structures, our current administration, President Trump, has made an emphasis about improving our infrastructure during the campaign trail, as well as released a new federal budget to address the nation's infrastructure deficit, which creates a new incentive grant which prioritizes maintenance rather than creating more incentives to create new structures. And that's all I have.
All right, well, the structure is okay. The first point, you basically kind of challenge some of the notions that there's a lack of new innovation. You suggest that there are alternative technologies and things that are coming along that are going to replace a lot of these things. I don't, it's not until the last point where you actually tell us what some of those things are, but I thought that that was generally a good strategy to suggest that the notion that we always have to stick with what's old instead of paying attention to what is replacing something. If a new bridge, for example, just a quick illustration, if a new bridge can carry twice the load and extend the capacity of an old bridge, then maintaining the old bridge doesn't make any sense. And building the new one makes a lot of sense, and if we're using those kinds of materials and we have that kind of technology, then why wouldn't we do that sort of thing? The notion that we have to keep the old one and not build a new one, I think that's one of the problems that's going on here, that old stuff, it's too late, I'm too tired, there's a word sitting there that's not going to come out, so I'm having more trouble finding that word than you were having saying rehabilitation. Which, I'm sorry, I did have to laugh at one point because I know you're reading the word and you're reading it as if you've never seen the word before. And I know what the word is. Everybody else knows what the word is, but it was just one of those funny things. It's kind of stuff that happens. I like the information about how much money we actually have invested at this particular point. You kind of acknowledge that we probably need more, which I don't think is necessarily to be challenged. Later on, though, at the end of the speech, you're saying we are trying to prioritize those things a little bit more, so I think that that's a good response that would mix with that particular point. The notion that dams, for instance, are privately owned, and so the infrastructure issue is less a government responsibility, but that FEMA has taken some effort to assist people in giving them guidelines about that. That's an okay point. I don't know how much it mitigates the need to address those kinds of issues, but at least it's an answer that doesn't simply say, well, who cares? I also appreciated at one point you had this interesting argument. This is, the evidence that the advocate's using is designed to kind of throw us into this negative relief in comparison to other countries. But when we look at how it stacks up, we're only 9th on the list out of, you don't say how many countries, I assume, whatever it is, 170 countries, 9th on the list when it comes to these sorts of things. So some people are doing better than us, but we're doing better than a lot of other folks. And it seems like everybody faces these sorts of issues. The notion that this is going to be a long-term problem, I think, is not necessarily demonstrated. And that's when, and then you get into the argument about, we got all these new technologies and new materials and that sort of thing. It's going to make doing some of these things cheaper. I think that might be another one of those responses that you make to the political argument that says one of the reasons that politicians have to wait or are slow to do these things because it costs money and it burdens the taxpayers. But if there's a way that we can do it faster, cheaper, and it's better in the long run by waiting, why wouldn't we do that instead of going ahead and fixing something that's, and that word's again, obsolescence is the word that I'm trying to, is reaching its point of obsolescence and has to be replaced. Well, let's build the new thing instead of fixing the old thing. Fixing the old thing is great when that's the way that it works best, but does it always work best in that situation? I'm not sure that the advocate presented that point very effectively. All right, I'm going to stop talking here because I've stopped making sense.